Armstrong's War Cycle, a concise future blueprint. Introduction: the rhythm of conflict. For centuries, human history has followed a pattern of recurring wars and upheavals. Empires rise and fall, debt piles up, resources become strained, and eventually conflict erupts. While most historians treat wars as isolated events sparked by politics, personalities, or chance, Martin Armstrong has argued for decades that war itself follows a predictable cycle, one that can be measured, analyzed, and projected forward in time. His model, the war cycle, identifies recurring intervals between major conflicts, suggesting that geopolitical upheaval is not random but cyclical. This framework provides a roadmap for understanding not only past wars, but also the rising tensions that define today's world and what may come next. The structure of the war cycle. Armstrong's war cycle operates on an 8.6-year rhythm within his broader economic confidence model, ECM, but with extended peaks in the 53-72-year range that align with large-scale wars. Key phases of the cycle. Build-up. Debt accumulation, uneven technological advances, and geopolitical imbalances create pressure. Peak. War erupts or global tensions climax, often coinciding with financial crises and commodity dislocations. Decline. After initial violence, systems reset through treaties, reconstruction, and new institutions. The model ties war to economic stress, with sovereign defaults, resource shortages, and inequality acting as catalysts. Armstrong emphasizes that wars are not just political choices, they are the release valves of systemic imbalances. Historical validation. Wars, predictable rhythm, the World Wars. 1. The World Wars. World War I, 1914-1918, erupted after decades of rising debt, industrial overcapacity, and imperial rivalries. The 1913 creation of the Federal Reserve marked a new monetary era, just before global collapse. World War II, 1939-1945, aligned with Armstrong's projected cycle, following the Great Depression and sovereign defaults of the 1930s. The span between WWI and WE2s fits the war cycle's predicted rhythm of 26 years, 3 8.6-year waves. 2. The Cold War, 1947-1991, not a conventional global war but a prolonged geopolitical conflict that Armstrong maps as a long-cycle war involving proxy battles, arms races, and ideological clashes. The Korean War, 1950, Vietnam War, 1960s-70s, and Afghanistan, 1979-1989, all line up with cycle peaks. 3. Modern conflicts, Middle East conflicts, Gulf Wars, 1991 and 2003, the breakup of Yugoslavia, 1990s, and the Ukraine-Russia crisis, 2014-present, all correspond with projected ECM war cycle points. The mechanics behind war. The mechanics behind war. 1. Debt and defaults. Historically, wars erupt during or after sovereign defaults. For example, the 1930s sovereign debt crises preceded WW2. Latin American defaults in the 1980s coincided with regional proxy wars. Debt is not just financial stress, it undermines governments' legitimacy and drives leaders toward external conflict as a distraction. 2. Commodity prices. Armstrong highlights the role of commodity cycles in fueling conflict. Rising grain prices were linked to revolutions in 1848 and the Arab Spring, 2010s. 3. Technologies, double-edged sword. New technologies historically trigger war by shifting power balances. Gunpowder, 15th century, mechanization, 20th century, and nuclear weapons all altered conflict dynamics. Today, artificial intelligence, drones, and cyber warfare play the same disruptive role. Armstrong warns that AI is dual use, a driver of economic efficiency, but also a destabilizing force when weaponized. The war cycle and present-day tensions. 1. 2026-2032 peak window. Armstrong has repeatedly highlighted 2026 as a war cycle peak, aligning with the broader ECM. This period is projected to see escalating conflict risk, not necessarily world war in the classical sense, but multi-regional upheavals. 2. Current flashpoints. Eastern Europe. The Russia-Ukraine war has reopened Cold War-style fault lines, with NATO expansion and sanctions echoing past escalation patterns. Middle East. Resource-driven conflicts remain volatile, with Iran, Israel, and Saudi Arabia locked in cycles of proxy tension. Taiwan Strait. China's ambition for reunification collides with U.S. defense commitments, making this one of the highest probability triggers for global war. 3. Supply chain fragility. The COVID-19 pandemic revealed how quickly supply chains collapse under stress. Wars amplify these shocks. Disruption of grain exports from Ukraine, semiconductors from Taiwan, or oil from the Middle East could rapidly cascade into global systemic crises. Strategic implications of the war cycle. 1. Energy transition. 2. AI and cyber conflicts. 3. The role of the U.S. dollar. The dollar's reserve status has historically enabled U.S. global dominance. But as debt climbs and de-dollarization trends spread, BRICS currency initiatives, bilateral trade bypassing USD, Armstrong warns of a monetary fracture point. Looking ahead, 2026 and beyond, indicators to watch: debt crises, sovereign defaults in emerging markets, pressure on U.S. treasuries, commodity spikes, grain and energy shocks, currency realignments, moves by BRICS or regional blocs to escape dollar dominance, escalating AI use, military applications of AI and drones as destabilizers. Possible outcomes: regional conflicts, expanding, Ukraine and Taiwan could draw in superpowers, financial warfare intensifies, sanctions, asset seizures, and digital currency wars become standard. New alliances, shifts in power blocks, US, Japan, India versus China, Russia, Iran. Domestic turmoil. Internal divisions within Western democracies act as multipliers for external conflict. Conclusion: the blueprint for a cyclical future. Martin Armstrong's war cycle demonstrates that wars are not random or isolated events. They are predictable outcomes of systemic pressures. Debt, commodities, technology, and power imbalances converge in repeating patterns that have held true for centuries. As we approach the 2026-2032 peak window, the world faces a convergence of risks: rising debt burdens, resource scarcity, technological disruption, and geopolitical flashpoints across multiple regions. Understanding this cyclical framework is not just an intellectual exercise. It is a survival tool. Individuals, investors, and nations who grasp the rhythm of history can prepare more effectively for what comes next. Armstrong's war cycle is not prophecy. It is pattern recognition. And as history has shown, ignoring these patterns comes at a devastating cost. For a deeper exploration of Armstrong's predictive models and how they apply beyond geopolitics, don't miss The World, according to Martin Armstrong, Bit. Y. Foil X 7.